Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Some interesting updates today. One we expected, another one that continues a situation that it looks like it's going to continue on until the NFL says something. So we'll start with that one, right? Quinshon Junkins, we thought maybe there would be some flex in this situation since this became a non-criminal or at least legal situation because the courts chose to not press charges or pursue the case. That's what they said, pursue the case. My bad. They chose not to pursue the case. So, some of us were thinking, oh, this means Quinshon's going to be back in camp. He's going to be back practicing. Some people even went as far to say he's not going to get suspended. Now, I did not think that was the case. I think if you read through the manifest of the defense attorney, wherever they dropped, it's pretty clear that Quinshon is still possibly going to face suspension here by the NFL, given the lower standards of proof that they have in the NFL to suspend somebody versus like the court of law to send somebody to jail. And that meant to me that the situation maybe might show some progress as far as like Quinshon signing his contract. But as far as the Browns getting him on the field, I don't know how much really changed there. This is another update. It comes from Adam Schefter. It says, though Cleveland's second-round pick Quinshon will not face any charges, he and the Browns are still unable to reach a deal and may not until the end of any NFL investigation. I saw that, and I remember that conversation I had with people in Cincinnati about the Shamar Stewart situation, right? And basically, the Shamar Stewart holdout was because of the language around guaranteed money. And the reason that was important was because if Shamar Stewart got suspended, there are ways you can structure the contract to void the guaranteed money if he gets suspended under that rookie deal. The question right now, I think, that's going on between Cleveland and Quinshon Junkins' camp is there going to be language in here that includes this incident because I wasn't under contract technically when it happened? Basically saying, hey, you can't void my guarantees down the line because of this incident. You have to void my guarantees if I get into another incident after this one because I wasn't under contract. I think that's the kind of language thing that they're working on. If you're the Browns, you clearly want the normal framing of that contract, which is, hey, you get suspended while you're under care of the team. So rookie camp, mini camp in that area, you're gonna, for an incident that you did while you were under care of the team, that's gonna have consequences to your contract. I think the way that the Quinshon's camp is trying to work it is that so it's not. That's what I think is going on, or at least in my mind, what's going on. We'll see what happens. Very likely, I think the Browns and Junkins are just going to have to wait until the NFL says something about this. But we're getting pretty close to the start of the season, and we really haven't heard anything from the NFL yet. And yes, I know some of you guys are asking this question. The NFL can absolutely suspend you if you are not under contract with the team. I know some people are thinking that that's some kind of loophole around this situation. That's not true. I can get suspended from the NFL for 7 games. I don't have a contract with the NFL. But if they say, hey, this dude did something, we don't want him on the NFL field for at least 7 games, so you sign him to a contract, then that suspension has to be honored. That's how it works. That's how it works. You can absolutely get suspended if you don't have an NFL contract. Because you're still part of the NFL Players Association the second you decide to jump into the player pool, right, for the draft. So you're basically accepting that membership, accepting to be under the authority of the NFL as far as your activation into that league, and that's part of being able to accept yourself into the draft. The idea that he's not going to get suspended because he doesn't have contract, crazy talk. You can't put on the commissioner's exempt list. You can definitely get suspended. So I don't know. I feel like this situation has been taking too long in general. I don't get why both sides waited until charges were dropped or not. Just sign them, make the NFL start their investigation, and find out about the suspension as soon as possible is how I would want this thing to be dealt with. Because what you don't want to have happen is the NFL saying, well, we're not really going to rule on a suspension until you sign him. And then you sign him 4 weeks into the season. They go, by the way, it's a 5-game suspension. And then basically the guy just got suspended for 9 games. That would not be how I want this to go down, right? But there's no avoiding the suspension if you're Quinshon Junkins if they decide to suspend you for this incident. And if you're the Browns, like, just get them under contract, man. Like, I understand wanting the guarantees or the language on the guarantees change after somebody just literally demonstrated that they might not be the guy that you want to have those guarantees with. But they got to figure this out. It's in both parties' best interest to figure this out sooner than later, instead of just kind of kicking the can down the road. Nobody benefits from this. That's my thoughts on it, right? Like, you know, and I know people are like, well, why don't they want to sign Quinshon and give him guarantees when they just gave Isaiah Bond guaranteed money? One, it's much less guaranteed money for Isaiah Bond. It's only like $3 million total for him. And two, I don't think it's very likely that Isaiah Bond gets suspended for what went down with him versus Junkins, right? Because one, Isaiah Bond's whole situation happened before he entered the NFL draft, or at least before he was drafted by an NFL team and in somebody's camp. Quinshon's happened while he was in somebody's camp. And the second thing is the Bond thing seems much more he said, she said than this Junkins thing where, you know, there is more going on with that than the Bond case. So I do think that Bond's probably not going to get suspended, but I think Junkins is. So they're just different situations there. I just want this to be over with so we know what's going to happen. You know, the Browns seem like they're going to be okay at running back. The run game's been pretty good in the preseason. So I'm not as like, this isn't as dire to me as I thought it was like a month ago. So that's good news. But, you know, just I want to see the dude play eventually, or at least know what his play status is going to be. And right now, you know, it's just a big cloud of nothing right now. So that's pretty frustrating. All right, let's jump to the next thing. Joe Flacco got named a starter. If you've been watching this channel, this is not a surprise. I've been saying that this was going to be the case when everybody and their mama was trying to sell you on the fact that Kenny Pickett was going to start for this football team. Now, I've always contended that the situation was always going to be this at quarterback. Joe Flacco was always going to be the de facto starter, right? If somebody in camp, mainly Kenny Pickett, demonstrated that they're as good or better than Joe Flacco, then they would have got the job. But if nobody demonstrates they're better than Joe Flacco, then Joe Flacco is going to have the job. Now, what Joe Flacco did in camp was not just demonstrate that nobody was better or as good as him, but demonstrate that he is pretty good in this offense. So nobody was better than Joe Flacco. Kenny Pickett didn't really practice. Dylan Gabriel looks good, but not better than Joe Flacco. Shedeur Sanders looks good, but not better than Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is your starting quarterback. Not really much of a surprise, but whenever we talk about quarterback with this team, we always got to talk about the fact that there's 4 quarterbacks on this team, right? What are the Browns going to do? Are they going to roster the 4 quarterbacks? It's been the most sensational thing of all time. I talked about it in a video earlier when Isaiah Bond signed his contract, that what the question is going to be for the Browns is like, do you want to keep Deontay Johnson or do you want to keep a 4th quarterback? Right. I think that's what this is going to come down to. Because if you look at the Browns offense, if you look at the Browns roster, right, you can't afford to cut anybody or not keep your normal amount of tight ends. You can't afford to not keep your normal amount of offensive linemen, given that you're going to run the ball a lot. You need to keep probably 4 running backs because you're going to run the ball a lot. You know, Quinshon Junkins is probably going to make the 53. So, like, you got to roster him, right? Unless he's suspended, then you can get that roster spot back. But, you know, it's a whole thing. So you're probably keeping 4 running backs, maybe 5. Well, now 5 would be crazy, right? 5 would be crazy. They're not keeping 5. So you're not going to trim any fat there at running back, right? And if you're going to keep the extra quarterback, you got to trim fat somewhere. I think wide receiver is the one spot they can trim. They're not going to touch the defense. The defense is going to get their normal allowance of players because that's the strength of the team. You're not going to shorthand the strength of the team. You look at wide receiver, you're not going to use a ton of 5 wide anyway. So you're not really that worried about it. Like, I know people want Gage Laverton to make the team, but he's probably not going to make the team. So it's really like, hey, do you want to keep Deontay Johnson, continue this project, or do you want to just cut bait with it, keep Kenny Pickett? You know, that's really the question here, right? Deontay or Kenny, I think is the question that's going to be asked here. But those are the two guys who are going to be juxtaposed from each other. They aren't cutting Dillon Gabriel, and they're definitely not cutting Shedeur Sanders. Obviously, Joe Flacco is the starter. You do the math, right? I know people are like, one of these rookies are getting cut. Those dudes were never getting cut. Dillon Gabriel is not getting cut. After how he played in the preseason, he's definitely not getting cut. Like, I think the Browns will look at that and say, hey, he executed the offense at a high enough level to where you might feel like putting him in a game. You know, Shedeur Sanders has showed enough promise to where you're going to want to continue to develop him. So you're not cutting those two. You're not putting those two on the practice squad. You've seen enough out of Joe Flacco to name him the starter. Kenny Pickett looks real tradable or practice squad, you know. So for Kenny Pickett, I think here's what it's going to look like. The Browns are going to keep, they're probably going to keep 4 quarterbacks in the initial 53. And if they do that, they're going to cut Deontay Johnson. Now, what could happen is that week, similar to what they did with Tyler Huntley last year, they could hang on to Kenny Pickett for like a week, try to trade him, try to get like a 2027 6th-round pick from somebody for him. If they can get that, they'll move Kenny Pickett. They'll get that 6th-round pick. They'll bring back Deontay Johnson. If they can't do that, then I think they'll just cut Kenny Pickett, because the thought process there is that if nobody wanted to give you a 2027 6, which is a 7th-round pick value this year, right? So not much, not really willing to throw a flyer in for Kenny Pickett, then he's probably going to clear waivers. And if he clears waivers, you could put him on the practice squad, because you could sell to Kenny Pickett the idea of, yeah, you're going to be on the practice squad, but first half of the season, if Joe Flacco goes down, you get the start in a game a week, which I think Kenny Pickett will find as his best opportunity to play. So I think that if Kenny can't be traded, they're going to try to get him on the practice squad. If they can't get Kenny on the practice squad, they'll get Tyler Huntley on the practice squad. And I think that's kind of how they're going to roll throughout this whole thing. So I'd expect Kenny to be the guy, the short man out. Dillon's going to stay on the team. Shedeur's going to stay on the team. Obviously, Joe Flacco's going to stay on the team. It's simple math to get to who's not going to stay on the team, which is Dillon. I mean, not Dillon, Kenny Pickett. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with that. But that's my thoughts on this news. I thought it was an interesting day of news. Hopefully we get Quinshon back. I think Joe Flacco has earned the starting job. And that was my one fear too, right? Like, my one fear, the thing that would have made me lose all hope in this season, was that the Browns would have let Kenny Pickett not practice at all throughout camp and then say, oh, well, that's the starter. That would have pissed me off, because I'm like, what are we doing here, right? Now, the fact that Kenny Pickett hasn't been able to practice, I think, is maybe the reason that they might be willing to roster 4 quarterbacks. Again, I don't think it's very possible, but I do think there's like a 10% chance that they decide to roster all 4 quarterbacks. Because they might want to say to themselves, we want to see more out of Kenny. We didn't get the chance to see more out of Kenny. Maybe we want to see him. I do think there's a chance that can happen if they really don't value the idea of like keeping a 6th receiver on this team at all. Because I think that's where you would have to cut to keep 4. That's just my hypothesis, so don't take it as law or anything. But, you know, that's why I see the quarterback situation playing out right now. I think Kenny Pickett's probably either going to be traded or cut, and then possibly placed on the practice squad if you can't trade him. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.